So I'm at a very amazing historic landmark here in Athens, Michigan. It's the historic Greenfield House. I'm with Casey Bruner, and she is the president of the Friends of the Greenfield House here
Correct.
in Athens, and she's also the treasurer for the Athens Historical Society.
Yes.
And I'm about to take a tour of the Greenfield House. It's been restored, at least on the ground floor, and it's just beautifully redone. This is an incredible landmark. The Greenfield House was once the home of a man named Eldorado Greenfield and his family, which is where the landmark gets its name. Eldorado Greenfield was a proprietor of the Athens Mills and was an active and leading representative of industrial interests in the Athens community during his time. However, the story of this beautiful home begins much earlier with another pioneer family, so let's start at the beginning. Although it is commonly known in the Athens community as the Greenfield House, the home was originally built by Sylvester S. Weare. According to the book History of Calhoun County, written by Washington Gardner, Sylvester Weare was born in Vermont in 1827. He married his wife, Judith Watkins, and they originally moved to Allegan County around 1850. Where their oldest son was born. They lived there a short time before they eventually moved and settled in Athens, Michigan. They lived in Athens until 1861, where they moved again to Colon, Michigan. It was in the village of Colon that Sylvester built his first mill for the manufacture of interior finishing materials. He continued that operation until 1863, when he returned to Athens. Upon his return to the village, Gardner describes, soon after he returned to Athens, he improved the water power and constructed another mill of the same character, which he operated for many years. During this time, he constructed many dwellings and other buildings throughout the county, a considerable number of which are still in good condition as proof of the stability of his work. This mill appears to have been located just north of where the Greenfield House stands today. It was not the Athens flour mill, but a home furnishing manufacturing mill. According to a notice published in the Michigan Tribune in 1872, they make reference to a contract conveying the water rights and privileges from Adolphus Waterman to Sylvester Weare in 1862 to operate a machine shop in the southeast corner of Section 27 to run it on water from the Nottawa Creek. Here on the map is where the Greenfield House stands, according to the 1873 Atlas, and the southeast corner of Section 27 would be across the street. In the Calhoun County Business Directory of 1869 to 70, there is a section on the Athens village history, which further clarifies this arrangement. In the spring of 1862, S.S. Weare came to the prairie and investigated the water power on the Nottawa, and being satisfied of its importance, incited others to improve it. He made arrangements with A.C. Waterman, who owned the power, to furnish him with a certain amount of water and proceed to erect a sash and blind factory, which has tended very much to the growth and prosperity of the place. The same article mentions that in 1865, the grist mill was built. In the same legal notice mentioned earlier, it describes land being conveyed to Judith Weare by Norton Hobart and his wife, which was located between Section 27 and 28 and the land west of the grist mill. Again, this is referring to the contract dated 1862. An interesting note, Norton Hobart was another important figure in the community, having twice served as a representative of Calhoun County in the state legislature in 1848 and later in 1852. If we look at the 1858 Atlas of Athens in this area, we can see N.P. Hobart owning parcels adjacent to this, and the land where the Greenfield House stands as being owned by Howard. It would seem that the Hobarts acquired this land after 1858 from the Howard family, and then sold it to the Weares in 1862. In the 1873 Atlas of Calhoun County, it shows the house of S.S. Weare on this parcel. And we can also see another building owned by S.S. Weare and also the grist mill. The grist mill, in the 1892 Sanborn fire map, some 20 years later, is indicated as being the Athens flour mill, still owned by A.C. Waterman. The building across the river at this point is the Best Oil and Gas Stove Manufacturing, and you can see the Greenfield House outlined here. So when exactly did Sylvester Weare build the home that is known today as the Greenfield House? The home was crafted in the Italianate architectural style, which is identified by wide projecting cornices with heavy brackets and richly ornamented windows, porches, and doorways. For decades in Athens, the Greenfield House was admired for its beauty and unique character within the village. We can assume that the ornate crafted details came from this mill that manufactured interior furnishing materials, and as described in the other reference as a sash and blind factory. It's likely this barn building, which is depicted on the 1873 atlas, was this same manufacturing building, as the legal notice mentions the arrangement with Waterman of 1862 in allowing him access to the water. Today, there are remnants of mill structures on both sides of this area of Nottawa Creek. So the period in which Sylvester Weare built this house can be estimated to be between July 1862 and the legal notice posted in May of 1872. Allow for some time to set up his mill and the ornate detail in this house. Best guess is the house was built between 1863 and 1865. Here's an illustration from some point in the distant past that shows the residence of S.S. Weare, and behind you can also see his factory and the mill in the distance. This rendering helps us put a date on the construction of the Greenfield House to within a few years, because we know from the earlier reference that the Athens flour mill was built in 1865. We also know that the agreement between Waterman and Sylvester Weare occurred in 1862, and following 1862, he constructed his sash and blind factory, which you can see in this rendering is in the background as well as the mill. So this rendering alone helps us place the Greenfield House built by Sylvester Weare as having been constructed somewhere between 1863 and 1865. According to Gardner, Sylvester Weare had a physical disability which prevented him from serving in the Civil War, and he played an active role in the community helping to raise troops. So he was still living in this area even right after the Civil War. Per the 1866 Postmaster Directory, he was listed as postmaster for Athens for that year. Oddly enough, he was removed as postmaster for political reasons by the House of Representatives, according to this document in 1867. Incidentally, Sylvester Weare sued Adolphus Waterman in 1879 over the same contract, as per this notice in the Marshall Statesman. Later in his life, Sylvester Weare was still living in Athens. He went to North Dakota, where he placed an offer on a considerable tract of government land. He was not prepared for the rigors of that climate and died in North Dakota in January of 1883. He is buried at Walker Cemetery, just north of the village of Athens, off M66. The home would be purchased by Eldorado Greenfield, who arrived back in Athens in 1882. Likely this was after the passing of Sylvester Weare in 1883, as his wife Judy was said to be living in Union City when she passed away 4 years later in 1887. The Weare children had long since moved away by that time. Sylvester Weare's son, William Weare, moved away in 1875 and went on to become an accomplished lawyer in Union City and later in Coldwater. He was even elected for 2 terms as prosecuting attorney for Branch County. Sylvester's other son, Charles, moved to Toledo and helped found the Humane Society there. His only other child who survived to adulthood was a daughter, Weare, who resided in Union City. So who exactly was Eldorado Greenfield? Before he was born, his parents, Daniel and Catherine Greenfield, who were of German descent, lived in the state of New York. Seeking opportunity, or perhaps catching gold fever, they decided to make the overland journey to California during the gold rush. His brother George was just 6 months old in 1852 when they made the journey that took 6 months by covered wagon, referred to as a prairie schooner. Eldorado became the first white child born in Smith's Flats, El Dorado County, California, when he came into the world in December of 1853. Thus his parents gave him his name, Eldorado. Just 2 years later, in 1855, according to a biographical review of Calhoun County, County, the Greenfields journeyed back to New York. In the obituary of his older brother George Greenfield in 1928, it was explained that they returned by the route of the long journey around Cape Horn, which is the southern tip of Chile, as this was many years before the building of the Panama Canal. Apparently, one trip across the Rockies in a prairie schooner was enough for them. After arriving in New York, they moved soon again and settled in LaGrange County, Indiana, in order that his father, Daniel Greenfield, could care for his elderly parents. Daniel Greenfield became a successful farmer in Indiana, and he died in 1861. Of their 3 children, El Dorado was the middle child. He was educated in the local district schools of Indiana, and after his father died, he moved with his mother to Sturgis, Michigan in 1865, where he would live and attend high school. The family would later move to Athens, and again in 1871 to Battle Creek, where he would continue his studies. During the years of 1873 to 1874, he served on board a steamboat on Lake Michigan, working as a fisherman and later as an engineer. After leaving the service of this ship, he returned to Springfield, Indiana, where he would engage in farming until 1882, when he made his way back to Athens. His mother, Catherine Greenfield, would pass away in 1883. In 1884, El Dorado married Miss Ada Bisbee, who was originally from Grafton, Ohio. Her parents had moved to Michigan, settling in Sherwood in 1865. Her family would go on to become prominent entrepreneurs in the Athens village, establishing the first large business, Bisbee's Lumber Mill. Together, El Dorado and Ada would have a son, George Henry Greenfield, who was born September 10, 1886, in Athens. In Athens, El Dorado conducted himself in business, establishing a hardware and grocery store business until a disastrous fire swept away all that he had built. Undaunted, he rebuilt his store and conducted business until he sold it in 1892. In 1895, he purchased the lumber yard in Athens, which he operated until 1899, when he exchanged it for the Athens flouring mill. The mill was operated by both steam and water power and manufactured flour not only for home use, but also shipping it to foreign markets, shipping all over the country and even abroad. He also began manufacturing feed and turned that into a profitable business as well. To the north of the Greenfield House is the Nottawa Creek, as I mentioned earlier, and there lies remnants of the old mill visible today. People who drive through Athens cannot see it from the road, but the foundation of the old mill is still there, although broken into pieces. The remains of the mill pond are across the road in a small park. El Dorado was an active member of the community and considered a public-spirited citizen whose efforts were always directed at making Athens a better place. In my recent tour of the Athens Museum, there is a newspaper on the wall, which the center photo says in that caption that Mr. Greenfield is sitting right there. He was not only a successful businessman, but an investor in the community, and he also owned a farm south of the village. Both he and his wife were considered to be widely known and occupied enviable positions in the community and often invited visitors to their home. They were remembered as being celebrated for their gracious and charming hospitality, according to a biographical review of Calhoun County. El Dorado retired from the milling business around 1912. Ada passed away in 1914. El Dorado lived in Athens until his death in November of 1932. And he died in his home. Today, their monument in Burr Oak Cemetery is an impressive one, defining much of their family history. George Henry Greenfield graduated Athens High School in 1905 and went on to become an architect for the Illinois Central Railroad and designed many ICC bridges. He and his wife Helen in later years lived in Chicago and retained the Greenfield House as a summer home. Helen inherited the home after George passed away in 1968. The Greenfield House remained in the Greenfield family until 1972, when it was sold to investors who turned the property into a duplex. Over the decades of use, the state of the property declined in its condition and became severely neglected. In November of 2017, E.R. and Judy Ramirez in Athens acquired the property and worked tirelessly to restore the home to ensure this valuable landmark would be returned to its former glory. It is largely due to their initiative that this property was saved from becoming another lost historic landmark. Mr. Ramirez was quoted as saying about the purchase, "When my wife, Judy, and I acquired the house, we knew that due to its uninhabitable condition, we needed to decide quickly what we are going to do with it before it was torn down. After considering several options, we decided to restore it and to ultimately donate it to the village or a nonprofit organization." They went on to explore options with the Battle Creek Community Foundation and were able to obtain support. A community fundraising drive was conducted as well, and throughout the campaign they also received support from the Michigan Council of the Arts and Cultural Affairs Assurances, MCACA, and today the home is owned by the Athens Area Historical Society. The exterior and grounds of the Greenfield House have been restored, and also the entire first floor. A service kitchen was installed, allowing the building to be used as a venue for meetings, social events, and other service activities. The old kitchen room was restored as well, along with the windows, fixtures, and furnishings provided. All of the original furniture from the home was long since lost over the years. However, there is one mirror that is original to the house. The Historical Society has done a great job of trying to find furniture and artifacts from the same period to recreate the atmosphere of what the home may have looked like when the Greenfields were so well known for their entertaining. During my visit, I toured the main floor, and it's really beautifully done. The walls, doors, floorboards, decor, furniture, and fixtures really capture this history. I also visited the second floor, which has yet to be restored. There's a project in planning stages for the second wave of the restoration. While visiting, I was given the opportunity to ascend the narrow staircase into the cupola and was able to see not only the inside of the small space, but also the view from this vantage point of the Athens village. El Dorado's son, George Henry Greenfield, as I mentioned earlier, was born in 1886. It is possible he was born in this house, as the Greenfields acquired the house from the Weare family likely around 1883 after Sylvester passed away, but it could have been later. Apparently, the copula was a play space for young George Greenfield when he lived in the house, as he signed his name using a pencil that reads Georgie Greenfield in the stairway. This was likely written when he was just a boy. Perhaps he was practicing his cursive when he was 8 or 9 years old while still in school, which would date the signature to somewhere around 1895. There are also other pencil notations on the walls, presumably written by him in later years, that would make note of electrical meter readings. One in the very top of the copula is a notation dated January 7th, 1916, when George was 30 years old. Others are notations from the mid-1930s when he was in his 50s. Another interesting find during the renovation process was the discovery of a drawing created by George Greenfield that was found upstairs. It's been preserved and framed and is now on display in the house. It's a colored drawing that stands floor to ceiling of a woman. Was his drawing depicting his mother, Ava Greenfield? Or perhaps done later in life depicting his wife, Helen, or someone else? The restoration of the Greenfield House is a tremendous asset to the Athens community, and it will truly be wonderful to see the second floor fully restored in the future. The village of Athens will be centering a lot of activities around the Greenfield House, from events like the Athens Homecoming and other community events and festivals. I will include the links to information about the Greenfield House in the description of this video so that you can schedule your own tour. It's a landmark worth seeing. Being that the Greenfields were renowned for their hospitality in their time, one can only imagine the wonderful times that were once held within its walls. Well, that's going to conclude today's tour of the Greenfield House here in Athens, Michigan. You guys should definitely check this out and put it on your list to tour. Coming up next weekend is the Athens Homecoming, and this is going to be a key part of the events at Athens Homecoming. So put it on your list to come visit. They do offer tours. They're still fundraising for the upper floors, and you guys can take a part of history and help out with that project. And I want to put some links to this project and the Athens Historical Society in the description of this video. If you like today's video, please take a minute to hit the like button, share the video with others, and certainly subscribe to the channel. And until next time, thanks for watching.